There is one very boring white powder that might actually deserve a lot of the hype it's getting. No, not that powder. Creatine. Because somehow creatine has gone from being the thing that the giant guy at your gym takes to something we're now being told women should take, older adults should take, people who want to build muscle should take, people who want better brain health should take, people who want to improve their mental health. Basically, depending on who you ask, everyone should be taking creatine. So, is it actually that good? Or are we just watching another supplement get wildly overhyped? The answer is actually somewhere in the middle, because creatine probably deserves a lot of the hype. It just doesn't deserve all of it. By the end of this video, I want you to understand exactly what creatine actually does, what it doesn't do, whether it makes sense for you, and if you do decide to take it, exactly what you should be looking for. Let's get into it. We're gonna start with the part that sounds complicated, but I promise it isn't. Because once you understand what creatine is actually doing inside your body, a lot of the other claims start making a lot more sense. What is creatine actually doing? Every time you lift something heavy, sprint, jump, or basically ask your muscles to produce a lot of force very quickly, your body has a problem. It needs energy, and it needs it now. Your cells have something called ATP, which you can basically think of like a very tiny rechargeable battery. ATP is the charged battery. It has 3 phosphates attached to it. When your body needs energy, it breaks off one of those phosphates. Energy gets released, and now we're left with ADP. ADP is our partially drained battery. It only has 2 phosphates. So if we want another burst of energy, somehow we've got to recharge this thing, and this is where creatine comes in. A lot of the creatine stored in our muscles is stored as something called phosphocreatine. Think of phosphocreatine as walking around carrying a spare battery pack. ADP says, hey, I'm missing a phosphate. Phosphocreatine goes, I got you. It donates its phosphate to ADP, ADP becomes ATP again, and our battery is recharged and ready to produce energy again. That's the phosphate creatine's energy system. So creatine isn't really giving you energy in the way we're usually using that term. It's helping your body rapidly regenerate the energy currency it already uses. Your body also isn't sitting around waiting for you to buy a tub of creatine. We naturally make creatine ourselves. And we also get some creatine through food, particularly meat and fish. According to the International Society of Sports Nutrition, roughly 95% of the body's creatine is stored in skeletal muscle. And normal dietary intake generally doesn't fully saturate those muscles creatine stores. That's where supplementation comes in. We're essentially increasing the amount of creatine available in that system, which sounds great, but here's the question. Does having a little more rapid energy available actually make enough of a difference to matter? Does it actually work? This is where creatine starts separating itself from a lot of the supplement aisle, because creatine is one of the most extensively studied sports supplements we have. The International Society of Sports Nutrition has described creatine monohydrate as one of the most effective nutritional supplements available for increasing high-intensity exercise capacity and lean body mass during training. And one of the clearest benefits is its ability to support performance during repeated bouts of high-intensity exercise. Meaning, maybe you get another rep. Maybe you maintain your power a little longer. Maybe you can get slightly more high quality work out of your training. And I know what you're thinking. That's it? I took this powder so I could maybe do one more rep, but zoom out. Because one extra rep isn't really the point. If you're consistently able to produce slightly more quality training week after week, month after month, can that contribute to greater training adaptations? And that's where we get into the benefits people actually care about. Creatine supplementation combined with resistance training has been shown to improve strength and increase lean body mass beyond resistance training alone. In fact, a 2024 systematic review and meta-analysis looking at adults under 50 found that people who combined resistance training with creatine gained 1.1 kilogram, or roughly 2.4 pounds, more lean body mass than people resistance training without creatine. That's not magic, but it's also not nothing. And multiple meta-analyses have found improvements in measures of muscular strength when creatine is combined with resistance training. But notice the wording there. Creatine supports muscle growth. It doesn't build muscle for you. And the mechanism probably isn't as simple as creatine gives you one more rep, therefore you build more muscle. There are likely several mechanisms involved, but practically, the important point is creatine can help you get more out of your training stimulus you're already creating. You don't take 5 grams of creatine, sit on your couch, and wake up with quads, which brings me to one of the biggest fears I hear, especially from women, but won't creatine make me gain weight? Potentially. And before you throw creatine in the garbage, let me explain. When you increase the amount of creatine stored in your muscles, changes in body water can occur, particularly during the first several days of supplementation. Creatine is osmotically active, meaning water can follow it. So yes, some people will see the number on the scale increase, but gaining scale weight and gaining body fat are not the same thing. Creatine isn't magically creating fat. And this is actually one of the myths researchers specifically addressed in a 2021 review published in the Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition. The authors looked at common claims about creatine, including dehydration, cramping, kidney damage, and water retention, and pointed out that while creatine can cause some initial water retention, particularly during the loading phase, the longer-term research does not support the simplistic idea that taking creatine just means you're going to retain a bunch of water forever. Some studies have found increases in intracellular water, the water inside the muscle cell. But studies looking at total body water, intracellular water, and extracellular water haven't all produced identical results. So I'm not going to tell you creatine only pulls water into your muscles and you absolutely cannot feel bloated. That's too simplistic too. The more accurate takeaway is if your weight increases when you start taking creatine, particularly early on, that does not mean you suddenly gain body fat. Water and fat are not the same thing. And ladies, 5 grams of creatine is also not going to accidentally make you bulky. That's not how muscle growth works. If it were that easy, every guy at your gym would look very different. So at this point, creatine is making a pretty convincing case for itself, which is exactly where we need to pump the brakes, because then the internet got a hold of it. And the internet does what the internet does, because creatine used to be pretty boring. Strength, power, muscle, sports performance, great. But now, creatine is being talked about for cognition, brain health, healthy aging, sleep deprivation, memory, mood, and depending on which reel you happen to land on, you'd think creatine is about 3 studies away from solving every problem you've ever had. And this is where I think we have to separate this is interesting research from we can confidently promise this benefit to everyone taking creatine. There is interesting research looking beyond muscle. Because remember our little rechargeable battery, your brain needs ATP too. So creatine, phosphocreatine energy system isn't exclusive to your biceps. Creatine plays a role in cellular energy metabolism in the brain as well. And there is research suggesting potential cognitive benefits. But this is where context really matters. For example, a 2023 randomized controlled trial published in BMC Medicine looked at 123 adults taking 5 grams of creatine per day for 6 weeks. The researchers found evidence suggesting a small beneficial effect as one primary measure of memory. But they didn't find some massive improvement across every cognitive test they performed. So, interesting? Absolutely. Creatine makes everyone smarter? That's not what the study showed. Sleep deprivation is another really interesting example. A 2024 study published in Scientific Reports looked at people who were sleep deprived and gave them a high single dose of creatine. Researchers found changes in brain energy metabolism along with improvements in certain measures of cognitive performance and processing speed, which is really interesting. But notice what I just said. Sleep deprived, high single dose, specific experimental conditions. That doesn't automatically translate to take your 5 grams every morning and your brain will work better. A 2026 systematic review specifically looking at creatine during acute sleep deprivation found an overall positive trend in cognitive outcomes. Sounds great, until you look a little closer. Only 5 studies met the criteria for that review. 5. And the authors themselves concluded that more high-quality research is needed. So that's promising. It's worth studying. But promising and proving are not interchangeable. Older adults are another very interesting population. A meta-analysis published in Chilibeck and colleagues looked at 22 studies involving more than 700 older adults. They found that when creatine was combined with resistance training, participants gained more lean tissue mass and improved both upper and lower body strength compared with resistance training alone. That is extremely interesting to me because maintaining muscle and strength as we get older isn't just about how we look. It's part of maintaining physical function and independence. So when we talk about creatine potentially being useful as we age, there's a legitimate conversation there. But this is exactly why I think we need to separate well-established benefits from promising areas of research. And this is where social media gets us into trouble. We learn that something may help with X, and 3 weeks later, somebody is selling the one supplement every woman over 30 needs for everything. No, we can be excited about research without getting ahead of it. So here's what creatine doesn't do. Creatine does not directly burn body fat. It does not replace protein. It does not make up for poor training. It does not compensate for sleeping 5 hours a night. And it does not just magically build muscle. And you do not need creatine to get stronger, build muscle, or be healthy. I think that's important because sometimes when we talk about a supplement that actually has good evidence behind it, we swing too far in the other direction. We go from, does this even work, to everyone needs it. Those are not the only two options. Creatine is a tool. And like most tools, its usefulness depends on what you're actually trying to do. So who is creatine actually for? If you resistance train and you're trying to build muscle, get stronger, or improve repeated high-intensity exercise performance, creatine is worth considering. If you're a vegetarian or vegan, creatine can also be particularly interesting because dietary creatine comes predominantly from animal foods. A 2020 systematic review comparing vegetarians and omnivores found that vegetarians generally had lower creatine stores and that creatine supplementation effectively increased creatine stores and produced benefits in several performance-related outcomes. That does not necessarily mean vegetarians automatically respond better than everyone else, but it makes them an especially interesting population when we're talking about supplementation. Older adults, they're another population where creatine, particularly alongside resistance training, is worth looking at because, again, maintaining strength and muscle as we age matters enormously. And there may be other situations where some of those emerging benefits we just talked about become relevant. But if your question is, do I have to take creatine? No, I would still put the big rocks first. Are you resistance training consistently? Are you progressively challenging yourself? Are you eating enough protein? Are you eating appropriately for your goals? Are you sleeping? Are you recovering? Because I would rather you do those things without creatine than take creatine while ignoring any of those. Supplements should supplement something. They shouldn't be the thing. But if you've got those fundamentals in place and you're asking me, is there actually a supplement with enough evidence behind it that it might make it worth adding? Creatine is very high on the list, which brings us to the part where the supplement industry tries to make this much more complicated than it needs to be. What kind of creatine should you buy? You walk into a supplement store or search creatine online and suddenly you'll find creatine monohydrate, creatine hydrochloride, buffered creatine, creatine nitrate, creatine gummies, creatine blends, women's creatine, creatines with electrolytes, probably creatine blessed by the light of the full moon at this point. You know what I recommend? Creatine monohydrate, the boring one. And there's a reason. Creatine monohydrate is overwhelmingly the form used in the research. And that 2021 review of common creatine misconceptions concluded that there isn't scientific evidence showing that other commercially available forms of creatine are retained to a greater degree than creatine monohydrates. In other words, more expensive and more complicated does not automatically mean better. You may see micronized creatine monohydrate, which simply means the particles have been made smaller and may dissolve or mix a little more easily. That's fine. But you do not need to chase some exotic form because the label tells you it's advanced. Personally, I would look for a product with very simple ingredient list. Creatine monohydrate. That's it. And ideally, choose a reputable company with independent third-party testing or certification so you have greater confidence that what's actually in the container matches what's on the label. Because the irony of this entire video is that after all this research and all this marketing, the product I'd recommend is incredibly boring. So how much should you take? For most people, we're generally talking about around 3 to 5 grams per day. And the key word here is daily. You don't need to take creatine only on your workout days. You don't need to slam it during a magical 17-minute anabolic window after your workout. You are trying to keep your muscle creatine stores elevated Consistency matters more than obsessing over whether you're looking at 8:07 a.m. or 4:32 p.m. Now, you may have heard of creatine loading. According to the International Society of Sports Nutrition, one of the fastest ways to increase muscle creatine stores is roughly 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight per day for about 5 to 7 days, which works out to around 20 grams per day for many people, usually split into several smaller doses. Then you move to a maintenance dose of around 3 to 5 grams per day. Does loading work? Yes. Do you have to do it? No. The same position notes that taking around 3 to 5 grams per day without loading will still increase muscle creatine stores. It just takes longer, generally a few weeks instead of several days. Personally, unless somebody has a specific reason they want to saturate their stores quickly, I love keeping things simple. Take your creatine every day, move on with your life, and no, you generally don't need to cycle on and off of it just because you've been taking it for a while. While we're here, we should probably address one more thing. Isn't creatine bad for your kidneys? This is probably one of the oldest creatine myths. That 2021 review specifically looked at this question and concluded that the available evidence does not indicate that the recommended dose of creatine caused kidney damage in healthy people. Creatine supplementation can affect creatine levels, which is one marker doctors may use when evaluating creatine function, and that can sometimes create confusion. But an increase in creatine does not automatically mean creatine will damage your kidneys. Now, that does not mean everybody with every medical condition should blindly start taking supplements. If you have kidney disease, another relevant medical condition, you're pregnant, or you've been given specific medical guidance, talk to your healthcare provider about what's appropriate for you. Do it anyways, anytime you're about to take something. But for otherwise healthy people, the idea that taking a normal recommended dose of creatine inherently destroys your kidneys is not supported by the current evidence. So, is creatine worth the hype? I think this is where creatine is different from the supplement industry, because the marketing around it can absolutely get ridiculous. But underneath the marketing, there's actually something there. Creatine isn't magic. It isn't going to override bad training, inadequate protein, or terrible recovery. It won't melt body fat off your body, and we should be careful about turning early or emerging research into promises that everyone needs this for your brain longevity or whatever gets added to the list next. But if you strength train and want to support strength, muscle, and high intensity performance, yes, creatine is one of the few supplements I think deserves serious consideration. And my favorite part is that you don't need the sexy version. You don't need the proprietary blend. You don't need the women's formula. You don't need the $70 tub promising to optimize your mitochondria. Creatine monohydrate, 3 to 5 grams, consistently. That's it. Which might be the least exciting conclusion I've ever given you. But sometimes the stuff that actually works isn't particularly exciting. And maybe that's exactly why creatine has managed to stick around while so many other miracle supplements have come and gone. So let me know in the comments, are you taking creatine? Have you taken creatine? Do you notice a difference? What questions do you have about creatine? Remember, at the end of the day, it's not about, is this good? Is this bad? It's about taking apart and thinking for yourself about what's the effect? What am I trying to do? Is this tool useful for my goals? I'll see you in the next one.